Hi YouTube, and welcome to my channel. This is the third installment of my countdown to my 50th birthday. So I'm still in the middle of counting down my first 4 decades, each decade in its own video, and these are all a little bit longer videos, and when I'm done with the next one, then it'll be shorter videos because it'll revolve one video per year instead of an entire decade. And if you want even shorter videos, you can go all the way back to my first set of videos in this channel, and you can see all of the original day-by-day, year-by-year countdown that I did for my countdown to my 40th birthday that I did 10 years ago. Of course, I look a little different back then because, if you don't know, I'm trans, and I was feminine presenting still 10 years ago, so I look a little different, but the memories are pretty much the same. That being said, alright, so let's get into this. So now I am into my third decade, age 21 to 30, and age 21, I am still in college at this point. I started when I was 18, obviously. I mean, well, not obviously, but like most people, when they go to college, they start at 18. And so at 21, I'm about second or third year into college at this point. I'm trying to remember. And at this point, I think I'd only dated 2 people. One in high school, one in college. And I recounted in the last video the rather bizarre way I broke up with number 2. So if you haven't seen that video yet, go watch that. But at this point, I am still a virgin. I had not had intimate intercourse of any kind, other than the most I'd ever done was, I guess it's first base is kissing. Kissing and a little above the waist groping, and that's about it. No one's been near my other bits at this point. Is that TMI? Maybe. I don't know. But I'm going there. So, I've always been an open book. I talk about everything, and if that makes you uncomfortable, then see ya. But yeah, so I'm 21, and I hadn't lost my virginity yet, and I was always been very socially awkward. I don't pick up on cues in terms of flirting, and I honestly don't know if anyone has ever flirted with me, with the exception of people who were creepy old guys. When I was in my 20s especially, I used to get, the few times I would go out and get a drink or something at a bar once I was old enough, I would get these guys who were in their 60s or 70s flirting with me, or even in their 50s, which, when I was in my 20s, they counted as creepy old guys, and I'm about to hit 50, so I'm creeping into the creepy old guy territory myself now. But maybe the older men, their flirtations were more obvious, and maybe that's why I noticed them. Maybe people my age, if they were flirting with me, were more subtle. Regardless, I don't recall ever getting flirted with or hit on by anyone around my age. Ever. I've always... And I was really shy. It wasn't until I was able to do some online dating and stuff that I was able to engage with people in that manner. My first 2 guys I dated before this, basically we met through social gatherings, and the first one was a club, the second one was we were in a class together, and we started sharing notes and stuff like that, and started talking, and it just kind of evolved into, hey, you want to go out and get a drink or a food or whatever, and so it was, it was never me approaching someone saying, hey, you want to go out, and it was never someone coming up to me. It was more of a getting to know each other as friends, and then kind of agreeing to, hey, let's go hang out outside of this group type of a situation. And so just randomly getting hit on is not something I have ever experienced, at least not from people my own age. And creepy old guys, just not my cup of tea. So anyway, so yes, 21, and I did finally lose my virginity. I ended up becoming, and this is again one of those situations where there was no hitting on back and forth, but I got to talking to one of my coworkers when I was working in the records office at my university, and he, I let it slip that I'd never been intimate with someone before, and he was like, "Oh, you are a virgin, are you?" Just one of those that the idea of taking someone's virginity was appealing to him, and that was a bit of a disaster because, let's just say, the whole thing with, I mean, it's bullshit, the whole breaking the hymen and all this, all the myth around that. But I won't go into that here. But let's just say that when the deed was done, I didn't feel any pain, so my hymen either just wasn't, as intact. It just wasn't as intact as some people's are, and I do think I know what happened. I the first time, well, back in the days when people used to use douches, and my mom insisted that I do because apparently, like she was indoctrinated in the whole, like, you have to douche. It's feminine hygiene and all this stuff, which we all know is bullshit nowadays. You don't want to do that, but back in those days, and I had gotten a Vagisil bottle of Vagisil or something, and I was using it in the bathtub. And I think I was about 17 at the time, and I distinctly remember it not feeling the best, and the water turning pink. I won't go into any more detail than that. And I honestly think that's where I broke my hymen. Is more than likely that. And so when I finally, get intimate with an actual human and not a bottle of crap, that's when, he was massively disappointed that he didn't get to do that. In fact, he got mad. He had taken me to a motel because I lived with my grandmother at the time, and I don't know where he lived, but he didn't have a place to take me for whatever reason. So ended up in a motel type of situation, which that in and of itself should have been a red flag. And then the whole situation, it obviously, didn't go the way he wanted it. He got angry, got dressed, and left. And I wasn't sure if he was going to come back. He had already paid for the room, so I knew I didn't have to just leave. But I didn't have any money with me. And this was before credit cards were really, like, they were only just starting to become a big thing. And debit cards didn't exist. And I had no cash on me. And didn't have a cell phone yet at that point. I think I tried to call my grandmother. I don't remember, or at the very least, I think I was thought of calling her, and I was close to calling her, but I knew she would have worried about me. Although she might have sent a taxi or something. I don't know. We would have figured it out. But I'm a very patient person, so I waited at first, and I just kind of figured, like, maybe he'll come back, maybe he won't. But I had, I had planned on being out all night anyway, and so I know my grandmother wasn't waiting for me to come home anytime soon, and the room was paid for. So I think my thought was, like, if he doesn't show up, when I'll eventually, I think I was just watching TV or something and just kind of like freaking out, but like, okay, whatever. I tried to calm myself down, just deal with it, and I think I was planning on just kind of staying there overnight, and then once it was daylight, leaving, and probably walking home, which it would have been a hike from where we were, but I would have figured it out. It would have been fine. But I think after 3 hours he did come back, and we talked, and whatever. But obviously that was pretty much the end of that situation, because I wasn't what he thought I should be, even though, he had been the first, human that I had do anything there, but, well, you know, it was the not the greatest experience, but you know, from talking to other people, lots of people have kind of had terrible first time experiences. So, you know, I got past it, got over it. Eventually, I had a good friend of mine that I met in another class. His name was Chris. I had a crush on him, but he obviously wasn't interested in me, and I didn't push it. And we just kind of hung out together, even after, because we met in Psych 101, and we would have lunch together and all this stuff. And we had a really good friendship. I really enjoyed his friendship, and so even though he wasn't interested in me romantically, I enjoyed his company, and so we were friends throughout the rest of college, and everything, hung out together. He ended up hooking me up with his friend Jeff, and Jeff and I dated for, I'd say, a good 6 months, and we were intimate a few times, not frequently, but we were intimate a few times, and it was fine. He had no preconceived notions about things, which is good, and but we wanted to go in separate directions, in different directions with our relationships. He really wanted to have a wife and kids. I wasn't sure I ever wanted to get married, and I definitely never wanted kids. So, and he was raised Catholic, and I was an atheist, and so it just was like, okay, this isn't going to work out. The funny thing with Jeff, which I still laugh about to this day. I mean, it's kind of bad, but at the same time, it's kind of funny, because I had been thinking about wanting to break up with him, but I wasn't, you know, watch the previous video to see how ridiculous I break up with people. But he begged me. I think he sensed that I wanted to break up with him or something. I don't know, but he was like, "Don't ever break up with me, please, please, please." You know, like, I was like, "Fine, I'll give this one more good go and see where this leads before walking away." And then literally a week later, he sends me an email and breaks up with me. And this is what, 1992, 93? So very early in the internet email game, and I get broken up by email. Which, again, some people think is terrible, but at the same time, I was gonna dump him, but he dumped me first, and, you know, we just kind of went back to just hanging out with Chris and just being buddies, and it was all fine, because neither one of us really were feeling the romantic vibes. It just, we wanted different things out of the relationship, and it just wasn't gonna work, and it was perfectly fine. It was a very, very mutual decision. And then after that happened, one of the things I used to do a lot back in the early 90s is I hung out in a chat service called IRC, Internet Relay Chat. IRC launched back in 89. I started hanging out on IRC in 91. And for anyone who remembers IRC at all, I started off on FNet, but I ended up in Undernet. And I used to hang out in the hashtag chat channel. And so that's that. I spent a lot of time, a lot of my free time in chat. And one of my friends on there, because I made a lot of friends, we actually had people who were in that chat room who were local in Chicago. We actually used to get together and have IRC parties, which was kind of cool. And one of my friends that was there, he was in the Netherlands, but the first 6 months that I chatted with him in IRC, I thought he was a girl. His nickname, and this is the Dutch pronoun. He was, like I said, he was in the Netherlands and therefore Dutch, and so his nickname was in Dutch, and it was Ijsje. Although I didn't know how to pronounce Ijsje at the time, and so in my brain it was Ijsje, which, you know, doesn't flow off the tongue anywhere near as well, but it's IJSJE, which literally translates into little ice cream. Or ice, I think it was just ice cream or little ice cream, because, you know, either way, but basically an ice cream, because apparently, like, well, he enjoyed ice cream, and so he used Aisha uh, as his nickname. And his real name, I won't give the full name, but his name was Bartold. And after I found out he was a guy, and we got to talking further, and this was like after Jeff and I broke up, and he was coming to the U.S. because he was at the Universität von Enschede, and he was going to California to work with HP Labs to do his master's dissertation or master's research project, because he was getting a master's in electrical engineering. And he was like, we started making this kind of romantic connection and everything, and he was like, well, you know what, I could leave a week early and lay over in Chicago for a week before going to HP Labs, and we could meet face to face and we could see if there's a connection here. And I was like, sure, why not? And we hit it off. Although that whole thing was in and of itself an adventure, because, and I suspect, because he was from Europe and I was in the US, and while I had been to Europe before, I'd never had intimate contact with people in Europe. And within like a day of his arrival and us hooking up, basically, I developed a really nasty gastrointestinal infection that kind of put a damper on everything for the rest of that week. He ended up going with me to the doctor a few times, and I was in the bathroom a lot, and it was nasty. And the fact that we actually stayed together as a couple after that is still amazing to me. But and I swear there must have been something in his biology that was that my body was like, yeah, nope. I don't know. It should have been a sign, but at the same time, everything works out in the end, because ultimately we ended up being together for 5 years. We were long distance for the first 2, because I was still in Chicago and I was in school, and he was still finishing up his master's and having to spend, I forget how long, I think it was like 6 months to a year at HP Labs doing this research, and then went back to the Netherlands before HP actually offered him a job, and he ended up getting hired at the facility here in Fort Collins in Colorado, and that's how I ended up in Colorado. But before we jump to that, I graduated. So I was in college, and then I graduated and got my first teaching job, because I have a degree in elementary education. And I ended up getting a job as an 8th grade science teacher at Logandale Middle School in Chicago. And that lasted a half a year. I won't go into all the details, but let's just say that the principal who hired me was one of those creepy old guys who wanted more from me than I was willing to give. And I was just like, I never, it just didn't even cross my mind to, I knew he was interested in me in certain ways, but I never acted on it whatsoever, and he never tried to back me into a corner and force anything either, thankfully. But there was another person at that school who I'm pretty sure was involved with the man, and he had a wife besides that. And she noticed his interest in me, and let's just say she made sure that I was shown the door just before Christmas break, believe it or not. A whole long drama with that. But yes, I got fired from my first teaching job because I made someone else jealous. Inadvertently. Not, I was kind of an innocent bystander in all this, but I ended up being the victim because I lost my job. The principal felt bad about the whole situation, and he made sure I got a good substitute teaching position after that, and so I was a sub for a while, but I ended up only subbing until the next April, and then just getting the heck out of Dodge. I was like, okay. I was planning on, at the end of the school year, moving to Colorado anyway, and they knew that. So the for her to try and get rid of me sooner made zero sense to me, but whatever. So yeah, so then the next April of 96 is when I moved here to Colorado and moved in with Barthold. And we rented a place for a while, and then we actually, like, well, I say we, but he bought a house. And we ended up both signing for the house, even though it was completely paid for by him. I had no money at this point. When I first moved out here, I had to work at JCPenney, and I could not get my foot in the door as a teacher. So I spent a lot of time messing around on his computer and learning HTML and making websites. And I got a 6-month internship as a tech writer, and then ultimately ended up landing a job as a web designer and developer at a tech company here. And I worked there for 11 years. So my career went in a completely different direction once I moved out to Colorado, which ultimately was a good thing, because I ended up making better money, and everything was just better by that happening. So I had no issues or qualms by having that happen. And by around 99, Barthold and I had at that point kind of grown apart in our relationship. Still have the utmost respect for the man, and if we could have remained friends, I would have happily done so. And we actually did stay friendly for quite a while. He met someone 2 weeks after I left, and she was an EMT, and they got married. Well, they became a couple quite quickly, and then they got married a couple years later, and they've got 2 kids that are teenagers, almost adults now. I mean, it's been that long. it's been a minute. But when because I think I was over at his house getting some stuff that I'd forgotten, and he was telling me about her, and his face just lit up talking about her, and I'm like, yeah, she's the one. Yeah, they're still married as far as I know. I ended up becoming friends with her, and we were kind of friendly, and were friends for a while, several years. But then she and Barthold, they moved to the other side of the state, and we just kind of drifted apart and everything. And, I think I ran into her at a convention a few years ago when she was in Denver with her son, who needed some medical treatments and stuff in Denver, and so we kind of caught up there. So we're kind of acquaintances at this point still, but just don't keep in touch. So it just relationships come and go, and that happens and everything. But yeah, so that was a big thing for me, was meeting him, moving out here. When I was in my tech writing internship, that's when I started going back to school. At first, I was thinking of getting a master's in education, but then I kind of quickly gave up on that idea, and I was like, no, I'm really liking this tech writing thing, so why don't I check out their tech writing degrees. And I was actually going to get a bachelor's in tech journalism, which was it was the Department of Journalism and Technical Communication. JTC was the department, and their undergrad was tech journalism, and their master's was tech communication. And I spent like 1 semester as an undergrad before the professors were like, you should be getting a master's. And I was like, really? I don't have an undergrad in this field. They were like, yeah, don't need it. They ended up getting me a scholarship for a year and everything, and so I ended up going into their master's program. But at that point, so I was busy with school, and I was working full time, and Barthold was working tirelessly. Well, he actually left HP and went to another company, and he's with NVIDIA now. I think he's a VP in NVIDIA these days. He did really well for himself, and he was he gotten really into rock climbing, and so he was every weekend he was gone with his buddies rock climbing and skiing and all this stuff. And it got to a point where the two of us, we hardly saw each other. We lived together, we owned a house together, and in name at least. It was his house though. And so after a few years I was like, we're roommates, we're not a couple. This is not a romantic connection anymore. I was feeling the need of something more than he was willing to give in the relationship, and I was like, okay, I need to move on. And it was a mutual thing and everything, and so it was fine. I did have to do a quick claim on the house because my name was on the house, but yeah, big deal. I had grad school to focus on and everything else. And then once he and I broke up, and I was, like I said, I was in grad school, and I was still working full-time at this tech company. I worked there until 2008. One of my classmates in grad school, he was married, and he was part of our kind of social circle where we would get together every Friday, and we'd go shoot pool and get some drinks, and sometimes we would go play Trivial Pursuit at somebody's house, or there would be a party or something. When he found out that Bartold and I had broken up, he started, like, again, creepy old guy, because he was about 20 years older than me, and just started in on the sexual harassment, and being very inappropriate and saying very nasty things, and I had zero interest in the man. Okay, he was way too old. He was supposedly happily married. I thought he had a lovely wife who did not deserve him being this philandering douchebag. And then when he couldn't get my attention, he started in on one of the other girls in our class, and when we found out between the two of us that he was doing this to us, all of a sudden all the women in our grad program just kind of formed a shield, and we just kind of noped the heck out of him, and he was no longer welcome in our social circle, because he was just he was pretty bad, with just everything, and just made everyone very, very uncomfortable. And I think we ultimately ended up reporting him to the university, and he was one of those perpetual students who kept switching majors and going to classes and stuff and never graduating, never getting enough credits to graduate in any one particular degree program. And I think they ultimately ended up kicking him out of the school because they were like, okay, you're just here to creep on people, and this is not acceptable. But finally, we got rid of him, and I finished all my coursework. I spent a year doing, because I ended up not getting a there was a plan. You can do a dissertation, not dissertation, that's PhD, thesis. I ended up not doing a thesis. I ended up doing a project instead, that I did through this. There was a website, an organization that I was doing website work with as a volunteer. A friend of mine had been doing it, and she moved to Texas, and so I took over for her. I wasn't a member of the of the organization, but I helped them out in terms of doing the website and stuff, and so I did a website redesign for them as part of my project, and kind of did like a survey of, surveying the members to figure out what they felt the website was lacking, and then redesigned the website based off of the feedback I got and everything. And so that was my master's project, and that was something I worked on for the final year, presented it, graduated, and I graduated 2 weeks after my 30th birthday. So I ended up having this big party right between, because I graduated, my birthday was December 2nd, and I graduated on December 15th. And so, the weekend between those two, I had this big party and had all my friends over and celebrated and everything. And that kind of rounded out my 20s, and I entered into my 30s. I was looking forward to my 30s because my 20s were quite an interesting little roller coaster. Not quite as much of a roller coaster as my teens, my preteen and teen years were, but just going through a lot of stuff with everything. And I didn't even touch on the craziness with my mom, because that happened, and that's a whole nother story as well. If you want me to talk about the crazy shit with my mom, I can, but I'll do a separate video. Leave a comment down below if you actually want me to talk about that, because there was some let's just say my mom went into an because she was an alcoholic, and she went into a detox, and that was a whole thing. Anywho, that will this will suffice in terms of good memories of my 20s. My 20s were good, interesting, challenging at times, but I was looking forward to my 30s, and my 30s, I think, of all my decades, was probably my favorite decade that I've been alive so far. So look forward to that video tomorrow. That will be my final decade-long video, and then after that, I will do one video a day of my 40s. Since the last time I did a countdown, I did a video a day from 0 to 39. So now we're gonna get 40 to 49 after that. So stick around. We're almost through the decade remembrances. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. If you're still watching, please give me a thumbs up, leave comments, talk to me, and subscribe if you haven't yet, if you're enjoying this content at all. If not, you know what? Hey, see you later. Take care. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.